Hello, stud muffins. Yeah, that's right. I called you a stud muffin. Hope you're doing well. Welcome back to the James Lawrence Allcott channel. Time for part 2 of the fallout this week. So much juicy gossip and tactical insight, possibly. Go check out part 1, Man City Massacre, where we talk about all the teams that aren't in this video, apart from the nil-nils. We're not talking about nil-nils. I might be in different clothing a bit later on as we discuss Leicester City. Something else to be really excited about. Before we get into the video, please take that finger and stick it where the sun doesn't shine, which is right where the subscribe button is. Liverpool 3, Brighton 3. The XG on this one, 1.47 to 1.37. Ooh, Brighton like to play possession football. Now, this match gave us a lot of interesting top lines. If this wasn't Liverpool, the top line would have to be the brilliance of Brighton, or Brighton brilliance, whichever way you want to put it, in attack, and how they've already taken to this De Zerbi style. We did a video on De Zerbi, go check that one out if you need to know a little bit more about him and his style. And we'll still touch on that, as there were some brilliant facets to their style and how they created chances. However, we have to talk about Liverpool's problems at the back because of how far they've fallen from where they once were. They were impenetrable. They were so strong. But now they're really struggling. In this match, Brighton created 6 big chances, which is a stat that not only shows Brighton's attacking verve and quality on the day, but also it's an insight into where Liverpool's problems lie. Sometimes a team scoring 3 goals against you isn't always an insight into poor defending, or it's instead just a team having a great day, okay? But the way that Liverpool are defending right now, from top to bottom, it's what's allowed this to happen. The bottom line is this: the Liverpool pressing right now, it is limp, it is half-hearted, and I think a stat that really proves this, especially from this game, is that in terms of their attempts to win the ball back, they only made a total of 9 interceptions in the whole match. Now, part of that is down to Brighton being great in terms of being press-proof, understanding their roles and responsibilities, and feeling comfortable on the ball. But last season, to put it into context, Liverpool were averaging, so we'd go past this, of course, 14.5 interceptions per 90. So that's a huge drop-off, absolutely massive drop-off. And that aside, the body language in their pressing, it feels uninspired, it feels monotonous. And for a team that's identity is intensity, it's worrying. What this meant was that Brighton were able to boss the midfield areas by playing out from the back 3 into that double pivot. And because Liverpool didn't really impose themselves in midfield, it meant that the Brighton double pivot were able to play any type of pass they wanted to, really, with little challenge. What this then allowed for was Brighton to be able to execute their tactical approach exactly how they would have been doing so at a much calmer intensity in training, right? So if you just take a look at Brighton's average positions here, it just shows that they knew they'd be able to effectively play 4 forwards at all times against Liverpool. It's just not stuff that we're used to seeing. And again, I have to go back and say, this is about Brighton. This is about Brighton being a confident team that are providing a different blueprint in terms of teams that come up and then step into mid-table without spending outrageous amounts of money. They're probably my favourite team in the Premier League at this moment in time. They give me hope as a QPR fan. So to play 4 forward at all times, because of Liverpool's lack of pressing, it meant that Brighton were able to find their forwards over and over again with little risk of turnovers. It's a brilliant attacking genius from Brighton, I've got to be honest. And obviously Potter's done the bulk of the work here, but I think what it shows straight away is that De Zerbi is a really strong fit. And a stat that demonstrates that Brighton really did boss Liverpool around at times was that they were able to create 6 big chances with 0 of their chances or shots coming from counter-attacks. Usually you'd expect a team that scores versus Liverpool to have sat back and tried to hit them on the counter-attack. However, this was just not the case. Fulham did the same versus them on the opening day. They took the game to them and asked them questions. And this season, it's the first season in a while where Liverpool don't seem to either have the answers or, dare I say it, have the hunger to address opposition threat. The short vertical passes played in cute areas by Brighton meant that they always kept the ball moving, which made the Liverpool defenders, Van Dijk being one, guilty of this, I've got to be honest. It meant that they dropped off constantly, which is just not what Liverpool do, which inevitably allowed Brighton to establish themselves in Liverpool's half on multiple occasions. Brighton look really, really exciting already under De Zerbi, and 3-3 is the exact type of scoreline we should be expecting from Brighton this year. It's they're going to be a fantastic team to watch, and I've got to say, I said it in the video yesterday, there's a lot of teams in that mid-table that are willing to have a go this year, and I think that's really, really exciting. Right, let's do it. Those sweet, sweet Gunners won 3-1 against Tottenham. It was a statement of intent, and the question now has to be, are Arsenal truly title contenders? I think you have to say they're the best of the rest. You know, I think it would be calm to say Man City are still the best team in terms of consistent form by a long way, but in terms of just general form, it's them and Arsenal, and then the rest by quite some way. In this game, it was 3-1, of course, 2.38 XG to Arsenal, 1.57 for Tottenham. Now, the North London derby was always going to be this feisty affair. There's going to be some high-tempo football being played, and both teams were going to opt for the styles that they have been utilising so far this season. On one side, you had Arsenal, who tried to impose themselves in Spurs' half and retain possession whilst also moving the ball with this high-tempo ball movement that they have been doing, and with that very well known now, even very quickly, right, system that they play and the areas that their players pick up. Did a video on this called how Arteta made Arsenal great again, so go check that out if you're an Arsenal fan, you haven't watched it as of yet. While Spurs sat back, we thought they would, and tried to soak up that pressure with the goal of trying to expose that space in behind Arsenal in transitions. From the score, obviously we already know how this one went, of course, but it's still worth looking at, as I think there are some interesting conclusions that can come from this match. So the first thing I want to talk about is just how negative Spurs were on the day. I understand that part of their MO is just to sit back and counterattack space. However, I think they may have taken it just a step too far against Arsenal. They sort of drilled into it that little bit too much. And I think that came because they were obviously concerned about Arsenal. And worried about the game. And I think the occasion from that point of view maybe just got to them just a little bit. This first screenshot is from the second minute of the match for them. For them to be this deep, this early, is just way too negative for my liking. If you have a look at Partey here, the space he had almost foreshadows that he would go on to score from a similar position. Also, if you have a look at Ben White, he's able to pick up a clever position on the edge of the box. It's beneficial for ball retention, right? His advanced position also pushes Son back into his own defensive third, which means that counter-attacking opportunities become vastly limited. I wonder as well, we were talking about it on the podcast with Flav, should they be playing a 3-5-2 or should they be playing the 3-4-3 that they played? I think they got it wrong in that sense. You had Richarlison and Son, of course, Spurs' most dynamic counter-attackers, both in their box here, right? And in fact, actually, Spurs had 10 players in their own box here in this screenshot. Partey's goal, it wasn't the only fallout from Spurs' negative play. Arsenal ended up having 11 shots from outside the box alone, and with the talented players that Arsenal have at their disposal, this just isn't a wise move. Another interesting tactical element I noticed in this match was this. The Richarlison versus Zinchenko battle was really, really interesting. And it was clear that Richarlison had been given the instructions of sitting on Zinchenko. Not literally. And to stay in line with the Ukrainian, even if he came into central areas. Again, not literally. This backfired for Spurs because when Zinchenko came inside and Richarlison went with him, it meant that Arsenal were able to sort of feed into Martinelli, who subsequently was like one-on-one with Emerson over and over again. And obviously we know how that one ended. Like, you could wax lyrical about any of the players that played for Arsenal in this match, but a few players do definitely need a shout out here. First up, Ben White. What a brilliant cornerstone for the team in this match. He was always an option when in possession. He had 78 touches. He was excellent on the ball, 52 accurate passes, and exceptional at winning the ball back. 100% dual success rate. Granit Xhaka, of course, we need to talk about him. I am giving him his plaudits now because as this facilitator, and a lot of people try and describe him, for me, it feels like he's a facilitator for this team. I mean, he played in that advanced 8 role brilliantly. He's been utterly brilliant. He's become such an effective tool for Arsenal in ball retention and progression. Versus Spurs, he created 4 shot creating actions whilst also retaining this really, really high average position, as you can see, which helps Arsenal sort of structure presses as well as being able to establish themselves into the opponent's half. As I said, as you saw in the title, are Arsenal title contenders? The only thing that makes me think that they're not is that I haven't seen it before. But I think we're going to learn a lot in this Liverpool game. And I think if they come through that, you have to say that they are. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. And if they aren't title contenders after that Liverpool game, if they were to win it, when will they be? The black and white derby as Fulham took on Newcastle United. It was 4-1 to Newcastle United. 0.47 XG to 3.55 for Newcastle United. This was a pretty open and shut match for Newcastle as Chalobah, of course, got sent off for the hosts after 8 minutes. Also, Mitrovic was forced to go off. With an injury after 37 minutes, which was really annoying because I brought him into my FPL team. Fortunately, like most people, I captained Haaland, so it's fine. But it also just demonstrated that it just wasn't Fulham's day. Kazar was also forced off at half-time with an injury, so the footballing gods were elsewhere. I mean, they were probably in the northeast watching it on a live stream of some sort. So with Fulham, the problem from their perspective was that their style, it's very open and expansive. So when one of their players gets sent off, it makes it really, really hard for them to play that style. And it's the style that they know. It's the style that they're going to play this year. So with that in mind, there might be a few of these when players get sent off for them. And against Newcastle, their only option was to sit back and try and use a low block. However, they're a side that just won't have really practiced that ahead of any match. So the game plan goes out the window and it just kind of becomes inevitable that they're going to fail for the rest of the game, especially with being a man down so early in the match. In my opinion, the loss itself isn't that much of a big deal for Fulham as they had a lot go against them in the match. There's so many elements here that's sort of hurting them. They've also got somewhat of an injury crisis going on at the moment with Mitrovic and Kazawa joining Solomon. Paulinho is so important. Harry Wilson, who was integral last year as well, on the injury list. So that could get a bit worrying for Fulham and something to keep an eye on. On to Newcastle United. Of course, like the sending off made it easy for Newcastle to impose themselves on the match, but I still think the old Magpies, who themselves have a long list of injuries, actually, did brilliant. Did absolutely brilliant. The average positions, as you can see here, they not only show how positive Newcastle's approach are. Again, it's such chalk and cheese from last season. It's crazy, right? But also how well rehearsed their structure is at this point after not a long period of time, right? There's a clear 4-3-3 there, and all the players seem to have a clear understanding of their roles within the setup. And now, most weeks, we normally like to talk about Bruno Guimaraes because the guy's a joke, Alexander Isak or Alan St. Maximin. However, not this week. Okay, the theme of this match for Eddie Howe's side was how the squad players came in and performed amazingly. Almiron and Longstaff, and let me just put it out there because I tweeted as a bit of a joke. Did he mean it? I know he meant it. That was a joke. I've learnt my lesson. I will sort of calm down with anything that isn't completely clear sarcasm. Sorry, Newcastle United fans, okay? Take a breath, all right? But Almiron and Longstaff, who were both on the score sheet, Jacob Murphy, who looked like a bright spark, actually, and Ryan Fraser, who also looks really, really good this season when he came on. It shows that the squad players, the players that we're sort of suggesting are championship players, I think when they're around these other players, it's lifting them. It's lifting their confidence. They're then trying things and getting to certain areas. And then, there's that mix of the quality and the players that I think, are clearly good people that want to do well, right? Now, despite this only being Newcastle's second win since the opening day, actually, I still think that they are a side that we've got to keep an eye on over the next month or so. And they are quietly going on about their business. And they're currently only 3 points off fourth placed Brighton. So, Champions League? Too soon. Probably too soon. Maybe. Jacob Murphy in the Champions League. Yes, please.
As promised, different clothes. Ooh. Yeah. Leicester 4, Nottingham Forest 0. Wow, we were. Scary times for Nottingham Forest. Or is it? And Leicester City have turned the corner. Or have they? Let's dive into this. The XG was 1.33. So this is a 4-0 game, remember. The XG was 1.33 to 1.10. That is very interesting, right? So were Leicester brilliant or Forest unlucky? Let me know in the comments down below, because despite Leicester only creating one big chance whilst Forest created 3, I still think it was Leicester who did deserve to come away with the game, because they were far more dominant than Nottingham Forest. But there were big moments in the game. Awani having some really, really big chances that could have completely changed the flow of it. With Nottingham Forest, first and foremost, I don't really understand why Forest chose to go for what resembled a 4-2-3-1 in a game if their plan was to sit back and allow Leicester to sort of swarm all over them and kind of play into their hands a little bit in that first half. It would have been far more understanding of this 4-2-3-1 if Forest went for it from the off and sort of tried to sort of have a go at Leicester City, the frailties that they've got, because I think obviously it would have been on shaky ground despite the international break, right? However, Forest, they pretty much invited Leicester City onto them, didn't pose much of a threat at all early on. The problem for Leicester is that they've had this season has been in that fullback position, because you've got Maddison, who's been wonderful, but in the video that I did talking about how you fix Leicester City, there's a problem when he plays as this right-sided midfielder, but then comes inside into central areas, therefore leaving that area and exposing whoever was playing at right back. So what I don't understand from Nottingham Forest and from Steve Cooper on this occasion, and I like Steve Cooper, I just can't understand why Forest was so narrow. Forest could have easily looked to overload that left-hand side. And it's not like they've not got enough players to do it and find the player that can kind of fit in that position to try and hurt Leicester City, because teams have been hurting Leicester City in that way throughout the season to expose that space that Castagne would leave behind as someone who's trying to sort of bomb on for Leicester City. However, they had Lingard there, who always wanted to sort of come short and didn't try and stretch the play at all. And in my opinion, you've got to play Dennis, haven't you? You've got to play Dennis on the left. It would have been such a wiser choice, as it would have posed so much more of a threat to Leicester City and exploited an area that they've struggled to deal with throughout the season. For Leicester City, I know Leicester won this game 4-0, but usually I don't think this would have been a 4-0 game, if I'm honest. 3 of those Leicester goals came from outside of the box. And we were talking about on the first episode of the fallout with Wolves and how far their shot distance is this season. The only team worse than them or further out than them is Leicester City. And the only difference, I think, in terms of the goals scored by Leicester as opposed to Wolves is the quality of the likes of Harvey Barnes, and in particular, of course, James Maddison. But these goals came from outside the box, and all 3 of them were worth less than 0.1 XG. So on another day, it could have been very different from that point of view. You've got to give credit, of course, to Maddison and Barnes, as their goals were superb. The average positions show us that Leicester were allowed to play this match in their desired fashion. That's, I think, the thing that's got to hurt Nottingham Forest fans at this moment in time, with their forward players being allowed to push forward as much as they wanted to, and their 2 midfield 8s being allowed to take up positions in those half spaces. So the question here for me, if I'm honest, is have Leicester City really turned the corner here? The answer for me is no, because I think you've got a Forest team that doesn't really know who they are at this moment in time. They still created 3 big chances in this game, and if they take them, then it's a very, very different game. So, but it is a building block for better confidence, and that's crucial for Leicester City after the start that they've had.